Okay, you guys, I truly, I don't know that we're going to be able to cover literally everything that has happened in the last 24 hours today. All I will say is that when you all were here for the broadcast yesterday, I told you that my spidey senses were up, that we were really in for it between now and the end of the day on Friday. And I don't even think that I had any idea what we were going to get, to the extent that it has all gone completely off the rails. All right. So, I feel like I've said this 3 times this year, but honestly, I feel like the last 24 hours are possibly the most insane 24 hours of a news cycle that I have ever lived through, and that we've all ever lived through. And if it feels nuts to you, that's because it is. I mean, this has really been a run that, even to just say out loud all the things that have happened in the last 24 hours is next to impossible. In any event, we're here. We're going to try. Welcome to Resistance Live for the 20th of September. I'm ECM. I am coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a white ribbed shirt with a tweed blazer over top. My thick gold hoops are in and my hair is pulled back. I am a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman, and I'm in my office in front of an oak cabinet and my plant and a stack of books. Welcome. Okay, so we have to talk about Mark Robinson first, because let me just say this. People have long known that Mark Robinson is insane. I'm going to remind you all that the current serving governor of North Carolina literally had to step out of the vice presidential contention race for Kamala Harris, because every time he leaves the state, Mark Robinson, as the lieutenant governor, tries to do something insane. And that's on top of the fact that he's already said things like, we have to kill Democrats. He said that from the pulpit of a church. He's been engaged in incredibly violent anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. And yet he managed to top all of that yesterday when CNN revealed that by tracking down a handle that he uses online as recently as his current Twitter handle, Mark Robinson made some posts on a porn chat site where he called himself a black Nazi, advocated for the return of slavery and said he would like to buy some slaves himself, posted about being a peeping Tom on teenagers when he was younger, described his affection for trans porn despite his outrageous, incendiary, hateful statements about trans people in the public domain, had his email address revealed on Ashley Madison, and described an encounter that we don't know whether or not is real with his wife's sister and her friend. That's like for starters. And despite all of this, the North Carolina GOP has decided to stand behind their nominee for the governorship of the state of North Carolina as of midnight last night. It is now too late for Mark Robinson to be pulled off the ballot. And I will just say this. The silver lining in all of this is the likelihood that North Carolina will now flip blue. That is essentially what this has resulted in as an incredibly likely outcome. So we have to look at, I suppose, the positives of this situation. And I also have to kind of issue a bit of a warning, because I've unfortunately seen an awful lot of transphobia floating around as a result of this story. Please keep in mind that there is nothing wrong, even though Mark Robinson might describe himself as a perv, there is actually nothing wrong with consuming consensual adult pornography in the privacy of your own home. The problem here is that he literally has advocated for policies that would cause an end to the lives of trans people while simultaneously doing what he's doing in the privacy of his own home. Okay. And I want everyone to be very mindful that we have to be very careful about how we talk about this. And at the same time, this stuff is so far over the line. I mean, I feel like that's the understatement of the year, that the fact that the North Carolina GOP is still behind him tells you everything you need to know about today's GOP. right? And we've talked a million times here about how they're immune to hypocrisy. They don't care that they're hypocrites, that really what it's all about is power and harm, okay? But I'm going to just mention one other thing here. Robinson is Trump endorsed. Trump has spoken at length on multiple occasions about how much he likes Mark Robinson. Mark Robinson has appeared with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, okay? This is what they stand for. They stand for Nazism. I'm not like actually overstating that. They're fascists, right? They stand for incredible hypocrisy, hate, violence, right? All these things that, you know, they claim in the name of morality that they're putting into play are actually really just to maintain white supremacy, patriarchy, xenophobia, all of the things that are the only things, honestly, that we see from any GOP campaign these days. And so take that as a lesson. The GOP, as we know it, is dead. It's gone. Should be 6 feet under, but it isn't quite yet. And this situation has made it extremely likely, not only that Josh Stein is going to be elected as the governor of North Carolina as a Democrat, but also that North Carolina, which was already in play for Kamala Harris, is now extremely likely to tip blue. All right. And I'm just going to tell you one other thing. I hate to tell you this, but I don't think the story's over yet. I think there's way more to come on this. And we'll have to see what that's about. All right. So that was one of the big breaking news stories yesterday. Only one, as if that's not bad enough. Okay. In addition to that, we have a situation, and I hesitated to talk about this because it's like a media-based story, but honestly, it's really important because we have talked so much on this broadcast about the way in which legacy media is compromised that I feel like I would be neglecting the issue if we didn't talk about what's going on right now with Olivia Nuzzi. So for those of you who don't know, Olivia Nuzzi is a young, 31 years old reporter for New York Magazine. She is like their head political correspondent in DC. She is engaged to Ryan Lizza, who is a chief political correspondent for CNN and also a chief political correspondent for Politico. He is 50. He was previously fired by the New Yorker magazine for sexual harassment. Lo and behold, late yesterday, New York Magazine made an announcement that Olivia Nuzzi, who has written a number of very questionable pieces recently about RFK and Donald Trump, including kind of very sycophantic, strange stories about Donald Trump's ear that I honestly couldn't get through when it was published, it came out that she has been having some version of an affair with RFK Jr., who is 70. And she has now been put on suspension pending an investigation, which essentially is likely to lead to the loss of her job. And really is the loss of her job because she's not allowed to report right now. The thing I have to point out about this, because I have to say, white men did something very interesting on my Threads feed this morning. And I saw this and I see it for what it is. Okay. White men were like, why are you slut shaming her? Right. And I had a moment where I was like, why is it only white men who are talking about slut shaming? Well, some of that is because it's a signal of their own complicity in these kind of relationships. Okay. But the other thing I'm just going to say here is that it is an egregious breach of journalistic ethics to be having some form of a romantic involvement with the subject that you are writing about or a source for material that you are writing about, like beyond. Okay. So when we talk about Olivia Nuzzi, what we need to be talking about is the fact that she is an incredibly compromised journalist. I mean, like to the point where it actually makes my stomach turn. I want everybody to understand that Beltway media is completely losing it about this. And part of that is because she has been given preferential treatment because she is a beautiful, blonde, young white woman that Black women journalists would never be given. And she's also being granted grace right now that Black journalists would never be given. And one of the things that I want people to grasp here is that whatever else is coming out about this story, because Olivia Nuzzi is out this morning saying it was never a physical relationship. Oh, okay. So it was just like sexting? Like that's not bad enough? The thing that everybody needs to keep in mind here is that when we talk about what's happening with legacy media, one of the things that we've talked about a lot here is journalistic standards of ethics, right? And the obligation to do no harm, the obligation to not compromise yourself in the process of reporting the truth, the obligation to not be biased in the way in which you are reporting on subjects or stories, right? All of this is stunningly bad. And you know, especially given that she's gotten all this like laudatory premier praise, it's shocking. Now, I'm just going to tell you all, yes, she has a storied history of praising Ann Coulter and, you know, making other very questionable choices from journalism standards, including like at one point, apparently breaking and entering someone's house. I have to say that this is this is also a story that is not over yet, because she is so deeply embedded in the Beltway media cycles that there will be more to come on this as well. It's quite a lot. Okay. Also breaking late last night, early this morning, are documents that were filed in a civil case in Florida concerning Matt Gaetz and his sex trafficking of a minor. For everybody who thought this story was dead, you're wrong. And I've been saying for a very, very long time that this story is not dead, that this story has legs that are going to last for like quite a number of years. Okay, so let me just tell you what the situation is in this case. A friend of Matt Gaetz was alleged to have been the host of a party at which a teenage girl was engaged in sexual activity with multiple people at the behest of Matt Gaetz. And during the process of this party, there was like coke and ecstasy and all sorts of other things on in play. And the person who was alleged to have hosted this party sued Greenberg. You may remember this fellow, right? Who's currently serving 11 years in prison for his role in the Matt Gaetz scandal, among other forms of corruption, and the victim. Okay, you want to talk about a dumb thing to do if you've actually engaged in this conduct? Suing the victim is stupid, because the reason why all of this has come out now is that in discovery, statements were taken of the victim, who, by the way, was a 17-year-old high school junior when Matt Gaetz was engaging her for sex. And I'm going to remind you all, that's not really sex, that's rape. And there are multiple witnesses to the fact that she was at a party at this man's house and that Matt Gaetz brought her there. Okay, so this is the first time that there have been publicly filed witness statements under oath on the record about the fact that Matt Gaetz engaged for money a 17-year-old high school junior to engage in what is essentially drug-fueled rape orgies. Charming. I'm going to tell you all again, the story is not over. I know that there have been rumors that, you know, things had been dropped and that Matt Gaetz wouldn't be prosecuted and blah, blah, blah. Just sit tight. This story is not over. And I'm going to tell you right now, the fact that this fellow was dumb enough to sue the victim for defamation when he's the host, and literally they've now been able to track Matt Gaetz's cell phone records to his house. I mean, I'm just telling you, this story has legs. This crime has legs. It is not over. It is not over. All right. Okay. A lot of you have questions on the Patreon feed. Reminder, you can become a paid subscriber at patreon.com/resistance live if you want to ask me questions that I will answer on the air on the broadcast every day. You also get progressive coffee hour on the weekends. Subscription starts as little as $5 a month. That's less than 20 cents a broadcast. And you should also, by the way, hit the like and the bell and the subscribe below this on YouTube so that you never miss a broadcast. Okay. So lots of people on the Patreon feed had questions about what's happening in Nebraska. Lindsay Graham went to Nebraska yesterday to try to get Nebraska lawmakers essentially to change the way their electoral votes are counted. So let me just explain this, all right? In some states, the way that it works is that it's winner take all, okay? So if the majority of the residents of that state vote for a particular candidate for president, all the electoral votes from that state go to the candidate who got the majority vote. All right. And there's actually been a move afoot to do this in various states around the country because it would essentially mean the popular vote controlled. All right. It's not the case in Nebraska. The way that it works in Nebraska is that there is a proportional assessment of the number of electoral votes depending on how the popular vote goes. All right. Lindsay Graham is trying to change this in Nebraska because if Nebraska becomes a winner-take-all state, then Kamala Harris will not have, allegedly, all the electoral votes that she needs to get to 270. And Maine has apparently publicly come out and said, well, if Nebraska goes winner take all, we're going to go winner take all. And that means that Kamala Harris is therefore going to have to make up more electoral votes elsewhere. Okay. So essentially, this is Lindsey Graham trying at the 11th hour to cheat Kamala Harris out of electoral votes. Is he going to be able to do it? Unclear at this point. Now, one of the things that's a challenge here is that we are so close to the election that the likelihood of this actually working in this election cycle is slim. Is it impossible? No, but it is slim. All right. And I'm going to remind you all of something else. If they try this, it will be challenged in court. Okay. There are lawyers up in arms right now working on all of these issues. And I have to remind you all that it's not like they can do something like this and it's just like necessarily going to stand and that nobody's going to challenge it. All right. Plus, I'm going to remind you all of this, all right? Kamala Harris, you know how I feel about polls. I always have to say this. Don't take your foot off the gas. Don't take anything for granted. Kamala Harris is polling pretty well right now in swing states. And the reality is that, you know, we are in an upswing kind of position right now, notwithstanding the fact that we really can't like take anything for granted until the election itself is called, all right? But reminder, the Harris campaign has 10 times the number of election lawyers on staff now that the Biden team did in 2020. And Mark Elias is in charge of the whole thing. So Mark Elias is already on deck in Nebraska to address this in the event that they try to mess with it. All right. Is it dangerous? Yes. Is it an indication of the fact that the GOP knows that they can't win unless they cheat? Yes. Okay. And I want you all to kind of like understand that it's not like they can randomly pull this and it's going to work automatically. All right. So take a breath. Okay. Just like take a breath on this one and we'll see where it goes. I'm not thrilled with it, but on the other hand, I'm not going to panic about it either. Other news on the polling front. I have to occasionally give you guys good news on the polling, even though you know how I feel about it. Yesterday, for the first time ever, Colin Allred polled ahead of Ted Cruz. This is insanely good news for Texas. And, you know, he's still within the margin of error. So it's so far from done. But I'm going to remind you all that, like, he could win. And I've been saying this since he was 6 points down. Colin Allred could send Ted Cruz home. So please remember that if you're going to send your money somewhere, send some money to Colin Allred. He's one of the people who desperately needs it. All right. Very good news on that front. And I'm feeling like fairly positive about it. Okay. I feel like I'm not going to be able to get through everything that's on my list today, you guys. I keep looking at it going like, oh God, there's that. All right. Yesterday, and I'm sure most of you missed this, Trump filed his opposition brief in the January 6th case in front of Judge Chutkan, claiming that the whole case should be dismissed because the superseding indictment that was filed by Jack Smith still includes the name Mike Pence. Essentially, what they're arguing is that anything having to do with Donald Trump's attempt to influence Mike Pence to overthrow the 2020 election is subject to presidential immunity. I'm just going to tell you right now that that is not how even the worst reading of the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity reads, because it has to be conduct that is within the scope of your presidential authority. Is it within the scope of your presidential authority to try to convince your vice president to overthrow the national election? No. But they're claiming it anyway. And the downside of this is that however Chutkan rules, there is a strong likelihood that there's going to be a request for an interlocutory appeal. Chutkan may not grant it, but we'll have to see how that goes. They filed a 34-page brief last night on nonsense. And, you know, again, I'm going to remind you, there will be a ruling on this in advance of the election, but there is not likely to be any movement in the case before then. Okay. I can't even believe that, like, you know, a Trump brief in an insurrection case is like item number 8 on my list today. But here we are. All right. Vivek Ramaswamy held an event last night in Springfield, Ohio. Trump is still threatening, and I'm choosing that word specifically, to go to Springfield, Ohio for a campaign event sometime in the next couple of weeks, even though local officials are asking him not to do it. The Republican governor of Ohio is out telling him that he needs to stop this. And, while bomb threats continue to be called into schools, state facilities are shut down. Security is having to be instituted for various government officials. It's quite horrifying. And I'll just say this, the Vivek Ramaswamy event did not apparently go very well, but that's not going to stop them from doing whatever they're going to do. I continue to just be disgusted by that entire situation. Chris Rufo, just like a parade of horribles today, you guys. I just feel like the people that I despise the most, the only person who I haven't mentioned yet today who's on this list is Stephen Miller. But the people who I despise the most are all in this realm today. And it's a lot. It's just a lot. Okay, Chris Rufo, for those of you who don't know, is the person who engineered first the CRT panic and then the DEI panic and now the woke panic out of his conservative think tank offices in Manhattan. He is an evil, you-know-what, and his agenda is essentially white supremacy. He also has made some really kind of horrifying statements on the record to the press, who has allowed him to run with this crazy agenda that's invented out of nowhere. Lo and behold, yesterday, after the Mark Robinson scandal broke, we learned that Chris Rufo's personal email address is also on Ashley Madison. For those of you who don't know what Ashley Madison is, it is a site for married men to troll for people who will engage in extramarital affairs with them on the down low. So, this is just another moment for me to remind you all that all of the claims of moral superiority by the GOP and their lackeys are horse, you-know-what. And Chris Rufo himself should be rightly dressed down for all of the harm that he has done. He's literally personally responsible for Claudine Gay having to resign as the president of Columbia University. And he went on a rampage to try to get every single Black university president fired. So again, more fodder for the hypocrisy doesn't touch them comment. All right. Couple of bits of good news today. And I have to just shout this out. We are actually literally in the election now as of today. Early voting has opened in Virginia, Minnesota, and South Dakota today. I'm going to remind everyone on this broadcast, please, please, please vote as early as you possibly can. It actually is insanely patriotic and pro-democracy to vote as early as humanly possible this year, because the sooner your votes are counted, the less likely it's going to be that there is going to be an argument that ballots counted after Election Day, which may happen, everybody remember how long it took to call the election for Joe Biden, are somehow fraudulent. Vote as early as you possibly can. Claudine Gay was at Harvard, my bad, I apologize. One of the things that I want people to just grasp here is that for the sake of organizers and mobilizers who will know based on data that is contained in canvassing software, when your vote has been registered, you are also making life a lot easier for all the people who are mobilizing in your area, which I hope includes you, to not have to door knock people who have already decided how they're going to vote. All right. Please vote as early as humanly possible. We really need people to vote early this year. All right. It's only the 20th of September. Okay. Someone pointed out we have 7 Fridays left now between now and the election. Let's get it done. Let's please get it done. By the way, the deadline to request your overseas ballot is tomorrow. So if you live overseas, please get that done by going to Dems Abroad or votefromabroad.org. Okay. Final comment for today. Oh my gosh, I'm getting through my list. There's other things. Oh no, wait, I forgot. Last night, we had the Unite for America event with Oprah Winfrey and Kamala Harris and Gretchen Whitmer and a whole host of other people who had hosted their own or founded their own white dudes for Harris, white women for Harris, Black women for Harris, including through Win with Black Women, incredible organization that kicked the whole thing off, Black men for Harris, all sorts of other incarnations of this, Swifties for Harris. Okay. Huge event. headlined by Oprah, with Kamala Harris being interviewed. And I'm just going to tell you all that if you missed it, the reason to go watch it is to watch the statements from the family of Amber Thurman, who lost her life after she was denied abortion care. And she's the mother of a young son. Her mom and her sisters were there yesterday. And I don't know how anybody could watch that and not be left in tears. This comes on the heels of Candy Harris, who is another Black woman in Georgia, another young mother. This was determined yesterday that her lack of access to abortion care also cost her her life. The statements of that family are so powerful and such a key reminder of what's at stake in this election, that if you didn't see it, you really should go find that portion of the program. It's gut-wrenching. And that woman and Candy Harris should be alive today. The only reason why they're not is because Donald Trump appointed 3 justices to the Supreme Court who overturned Roe versus Wade. And the whole GOP has blood on their hands. Like, there's no other way to say it. Like, the deaths of these 2 young women are preventable. They were preventable if they had only had access to abortion care in Georgia. It's disgusting. So please keep in mind when you are out there talking to your friends and your neighbors that lives are literally on the line right now in this election. When people say vote like your life depends on it, that's not an exaggeration. So please be mindful of all of this. All right. And yes, there were plenty of other compelling speakers there. Hadley, who spoke at the DNC, told her story again. Young victim of gun violence spoke. A whole bunch of other speakers. Very compelling program. Certainly you can watch the whole thing. It ran for about 96 minutes. But I do really encourage you all to go find the piece particularly related to Amber Thurman's family, because it will motivate you to get out and do even more to get out the vote. All right. Okay. Last thing I have to talk about today. There's been sort of a phenomenon on the Patreon feed recently where people are like, oh my God, I watched this horrible other thing on YouTube and now I'm terrified. Or, oh my God, I listened to this podcast and now there's this horrible thing that could happen and I'm scared to death. Okay. I'm just going to remind you all, I'm not going to say again the whole thing that I say here kind of like once a week these days about clickbait and how legacy media works. This is not legacy media, all right? And I'm not going to repeat everything that I said earlier this week about the fact that I'm currently really, really, really upset with a whole bunch of fellow political YouTubers about the fact that they are terrifying people for clicks and ad revenue, because I'm really bothered by it. Like, I have a decision to make every morning about like what I'm going to title my broadcast. And like, I could be writing those sorts of headlines that are like, this horrible thing you need to know about to make sure that, blah, blah, blah. Or this latest thing that's going to destroy the GOP. I could write a headline like that. I could do it in my sleep at this point. I choose not to do that because I don't want to terrify people and I don't want to make people upset and outraged. All right. But all that said, if you are watching things right now that scare you to death and do not at the same time give you an answer to how those things could be fixed, you should not be listening to or watching that media, period. Okay? Because if all it's doing is scaring you, it is actually causing you to be in a trauma response. And all of us have been traumatized enough over the last 10 years, and for many of us, like our whole lives, we don't need to be put into a place right now where we're frozen or constantly terrified, or for that matter, left in a place where we don't feel like we're motivated to get out and vote, or we're too scared to get out and vote, or we're going to pull our yard signs out of our front yards because we're afraid of what could happen to us. It's really not okay. You have to make a decision about how you are going to manage yourself emotionally between now and November 5th and beyond. Okay. And if you are listening to people who are scaring you with scenarios that I'm just going to tell you right now, there are solutions to that they're not telling you, you should seriously unsubscribe from that media. And I'm going to say that even for some of the big names out there who are doing this kind of relentlessly, they're not worth your time, your energy, or your mental health. And here's the thing, okay? Like if you come to me, like, and again, I'm not here to toot my own horn. I'm just going to tell you guys this, all right? When you come to me and you say I'm scared, my response is always going to be, here's the solution that you have not been presented with. And if you really do need to be scared by something, I will tell you, yeah, it's like worth being a little nervous about this. But like the situation in Nebraska, nobody needs to be terrified about that. Is it concerning? Yes. Are great lawyers on target trying to handle it to protect our democracy? Yes. And we need to let them do their jobs. Because I don't know about you, but I know from where I sit, if Mark Elias can't fix it, it can't be fixed. And he's on the job, right? So please make sure that, if you have a reaction that causes you to come to the Patreon feed or post on social media, this is terrifying, without either being provided a solution or being told what the solution is, you are being manipulated. You're being manipulated by the person putting out that media, right? And that's not right. It's actually I keep saying this, and sometimes I wonder if it's too extreme that I say this, but I think I've decided that it's not. It's actually abusing you. People are abusing you when they're like, you should be scared. And they don't tell you what the solutions are that are being worked toward, right? They don't tell you the answers that are underway right now, the solutions that are underway right now to do the thing that is going to stop all of us from needing to be afraid, right? They're actually in some sense, handmaidens of fascism, because if they're scaring you to the point that you're not actually willing to go out and do the work of protecting democracy where you live, they're part of the problem, no matter how blue they claim to be. So please do yourself a favor, okay? For the next 7 weeks, if you want to go back to being terrified by choice after the election, have at it. But for the next 7 weeks, don't consume any media that is so plainly designed to outrage you, scare you, make you afraid, or for that matter, claim that the Republican Party is going to die because of one random endorsement from Billie Eilish, right? Be smart about what you consume and understand that the people who are out there doing that for clicks are amoral in the way that they are managing media. A lot of individuals have been swayed by enormously generated ad revenue on the backs of our central nervous systems. And I personally find it obscene. So please do your best to avoid all that media, stay focused on getting out the vote, stay focused on your postcards, your text banking, your phone banking, your door knocking, your mobilization with your friends and neighbors, those deep canvassing conversations you need to be having with everyone that you meet. And don't allow yourself to be terrified, because fundamentally, let me just let you in on the secret. The answer to anything that may scare you right now about the election is overwhelming landslide turnout. If we win by a landslide, they're not going to be able to effectively contest any election result. If we win by a landslide where we live, including in swing states, they're going to have a much harder time in court. So just stay focused. Stay focused and ignore the people who are right now trying to terrify you for their own profit, because they're not doing good work. They may look like they're doing good work, but they're not. Because if you're leaving their broadcast or their podcast terrified, that's not pro-democracy. All right. I said what I said. All right. Stop scaring yourselves. This is how it's written on my notes for today. Stop scaring yourselves. All right. I love you guys. You're awesome. Please don't forget to subscribe. Click the bell here so you're notified every time I go live. Make sure that you are liking this broadcast. If you're watching after the fact, drop me a comment. Share this broadcast with all your friends and family so all this good news and these strategies and this political motivation and organizational strategy gets out to as many people as possible. Tell the algorithm you like it. And please, if you do enjoy this and it really helps to talk you off a ledge or it helps to motivate you, consider becoming a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistance live. That's a great community of people. And those subscriptions, however small, help me to pay my back-end staff who keep this broadcast running from a technological standpoint and do all the support work for our programs and everything else. And they also help me to feed my kids as a single mom, which is a valuable endeavor. So thank you all for being here. There will be a progressive coffee hour for our Patreon-only subscribers this Sunday. Stay tuned for a time. I think it's going to be somewhere around 10:30, 11. but there will be an announcement on the Patreon feed about that. And I will catch all the rest of you here on Monday at the latest. Obviously, if there's a need for an emergency broadcast, I will be live. All right. I'll see you all here soon, you guys. Take care, everyone. All right. Bye.